Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Just like forces of the universe are constantly shaping and shifting our reality, so too geopolitics. And we've got some emerging economic powerhouse. Stacy?
Right, Max. Well, first of all, you must note that I am in my tropical outfit here.
That's super tropical. Nice. Very breezy. We're getting ready. Oh, because I think Mitch Feierstein's in the tropics in the second half.
That's right. So I wore my resort wear for you, and I kind of think it's somewhere over the rainbow. All things are great. So before that, part of the reason why things were kind of not great in the world of Wizard of Oz was the Wizard of Oz himself. And the Wizard of Oz, which is the Federal Reserve Bank, I think has caused quite a lot of chaos with all of the money printing. And here are some of the results. So the money printing that has happened since 1971, remember we're 50 years into the US dollar standard, and the money printing hid a lot of the outsourcing of all these jobs, the sending all of our wealth creation potential and the manufacturing overseas to China. And the argument, and Joe Biden was one of the biggest proponents of this line of thinking, was that China's going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. Come on, right? Well, China overtakes US as EU's biggest trading partner. In the year 2020, China was the main partner for the EU. This result was due to an increase of imports by 5.6% and exports by 2.2%, according to Eurostat, the EU's statistical office. So, of course, like most people say, they don't trust Chinese data. But this is from the EU's statistical office, and it almost jives exactly. In fact, they show a bit more trade, like $20 billion worth more than China's own data shows. So, I mean, it's in there, but it's surpassed the amount that they trade with the U.S. imports and exports.
Right. So this is really the beginning of the changing of the guard. We're now handing the baton off to China. As the number one economy in the 21st century, the numbers are there, the statistics are there, the relationships in Europe, the EU are there, the relationship with Russia and Iran is there, and the relationship all over Africa is also there.
Well, if you ever run a business, what always ends up happening is your biggest customer you tend to prefer, right? They give you the most profit. They help you build a nice pension for yourself, a big house, maybe buy a yacht. Maybe go Caribbean vacationing like Mitch Feierstein in the second half. So China is everybody's biggest customer. They're Saudi Arabia's biggest customer. They're the biggest commodities customer. They're the biggest customer of EU goods. So the EU, the reason why they're the biggest customer is because, of course, Europe is Germany, which has a lot of high value added precision technology sort of goods. And China has been importing those massively this year. So there were a lot of imports from Germany and France with high-tech sort of stuff.
Right. And so this is, I'm curious to see now going forward how the global culture changes, because for decades, always Hollywood and the United States were the cultural touchdown of the world. Always referred to brands and American for their cultural references. I'm just curious to see how this is all going to play out when the biggest box office market in the world will be Chinese. Probably the biggest consumer brands in the world will be Chinese. So this will be a very interesting shift.
Yeah, of course, like the international language of the internet, and for travelers like tourists is English. So I wonder if one day that will ever change to also include Chinese or revert to Chinese or something, because it was that thousands of years ago, by the way, when they were the biggest empire in the world, or the biggest superpower for sure. So anyway, that's just the Thucydides trap, the story we've been talking about for over 10 years here. This is just the data. Most American financial news has always been saying that don't worry about China, that all their data is fake. Max and I have had Dan Collins is our regular for the past over 10 years, and he's always, for the most part, he was in China at the time, and he was way ahead. He was way more accurate, just saying what the data is, what he could see with his own two eyes all around him, as he pointed out in a recent interview with us, that when you tune into CNBC and Bloomberg for your financial news and try to understand how to gauge your investment portfolio around the world. Like they kept on telling you, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. It's all fake. We can keep on sending our jobs there. Like there's some sort of magic that happens whereby they create all the wealth and they don't actually get to keep it all. Like somehow we're the ones that get wealthy off of it. Well, now we're seeing that, I mean, those are the facts right there. They're the number one trading partner with the EU. There's, you know, you can't change that.
Right. The way this will be noticed by the average American is in the prices of stuff.
Yes. And that's what we're getting to, because the headline reads, just one of many in this past week, ConAgra says it may implement price hikes to adjust for commodity price increases of ingredients to include edible oils, pork this year.
Right. Well, there's two sides to that. First of all, you have the component of global demand spurred by the global dominant economy, China, forcing the price of commodities higher, which has the impact of forcing food at the store higher. The other major component of that is that all commodities, including oil, are priced in dollars. That was one of the bargains struck after World War II during the Bretton Woods Agreement. And as the dollar now loses purchasing power all over the world, that's a double whammy for the U.S. consumer, because they're forced to use dollars that are losing purchasing power in a world where inflation for commodities are now entering a secular bull market. And that's how you end up with an incredible gap down in living standards in the U.S. And I think that's something politicians are figuring they will just paper over with more money printing, but that only exacerbates this negative circle.
Right. And you saw, you know, the unrest, of course, across America over the past year. And that, to us, looks like in our first early days of Keiser Report, when there was a lot of unrest across the Arab world, across Europe. And that was a lot to do with commodity price increases, essentially at the fundamental.
Well, we have an American Spring.
Exactly. So, I mean, the other thing that happened in the past week was Biden did a town hall, and all his voters who, you know, all these young voters who went with the establishment and were like, okay, we'll get rid of Bernie Sanders and take your guy, but your guy will give us what Bernie Sanders would have, right? So, of course, you know, this 50 years track record with Biden, and he's always been one of the most right-wing of all Democrats, including like to the point where he was against desegregation. He was against those busing black students into white schools. He was active voting against that. So then that's on a cultural side. But then, you know, he was always neoliberal, always pro-war, always pro-banks. And of course, well, it turned out at the town hall, you know, these students, people with student debts were like, it looks like you're only going to give us 10,000 free money. You promised us 50,000. He's like, nope, can't do 50,000. Not going to do 50,000, maybe 10,000. And like, he was qualifying it. You have to be from this sort of income of a family. You can't have gone to Yale, Harvard, or any Princeton or things like that. Like he was already qualifying all the free money. He says he can't do it now. He got elected, of course, with these people, I think wrongly, at the time we were saying it, like wrongly believing he was going to give them a bunch of free money. Well, he's going to give them free money, but not as much as they were hoping for.
Yeah, well, the setup here is catastrophic, because the mob of peasants in America, and there's over 250 million now, are clamoring for poison. And that poison is more paper money.
Yeah.
And it only kills their purchasing power, which is going to put them back at the trough, demanding from the president more paper money. And this is not unique. This has been played out throughout history for hundreds of years.
You made a film about it, about the assignat, and the French peasants demanded it from the French revolutionaries. So that, you know, they took the confiscated Catholic Church lands and they backed it with, they turned it into bonds, and that was backing the paper. And then they wanted more and more, and they were like storming the gates and demanding more paper. And the officials didn't want to have to, because they knew what it was going to do, but the people demanded it. So yeah, you have these ingredients for a cauldron of, you know, just China rising. That's the Thucydides trap we've talked about. The U.S. empire falling. 50 years of fiat debt. It's been, you know, the fiat system was the most radical experiment in monetary history going back 5,000 years. So that experiment was tried. A lot of people got rich off it. It was a good thing for some, but it seems to be falling apart. If you look at the system and how they're trying, it's harder and harder and takes more and more extreme measures to keep it from falling completely. But once a collapse is set in motion, it's very difficult from that sort of size, whether it's a whole empire or quadrillions and derivatives like falling, like it's hard to like keep it back up, right? To profit back up. And you're seeing that in these commodity prices. You're seeing that in the disturbance amongst the population. The population's always sense that this stuff is coming. Something's coming. Something big is happening. There's a tsunami coming.
Right. Well, the problem of going on to an experimental all fiat paper money standard in 1971 that had never been tried ever in history, and thanks to Nixon, who closed the gold window temporarily, as he said,
yeah,
is that not only did it destroy the economy and destroy America's competitiveness,
yeah,
but it destroyed America's moral fabric, because nothing had any value at that point. Everything became financialized, securitized, commodified. Doctors went to Wall Street. People who were going to study to be priests instead went to Wall Street. Teachers went to Wall Street. Anyone who was part of any institution that was part of the fabric of society and the moral high regard went to Wall Street and fed this machine of paper money debasement. And so we have the economy debased, as well as people's moral integrity has been irreparably debased en masse in these United States.
There are demands for more money printing. The day after it emerged that he says he claims right now he's only going to print 10,000 for every student, which of course are mostly the vast majority of people with student debts are the upper middle class, upper class, middle class. Like they're not the working class for the most part. Obviously there are exceptions. There are working class people with big debts, but for the most part, it's just the bottom. And that's why they say actually that if you just write off 10,000, there actually are studies about which is the most effective amount to write off. And it's mostly the working class. If you write off 20, under 10,000 or about 10,000, under 25,000, it helps them the most. Because if you do 50,000 like they want, for the most part, working class kids don't have that much because they're not going to the elite universities. So you're disadvantaging them against their upper middle class competitors, like they're in the marketplace. So anyway, we also saw stocks slammed as producer prices soar by record in January. It's starting to hit the stock market. Again, that's the one indicator that all presidents look at, the Treasury Secretary looks at, and the Fed. They pretend, as Nomi Prinz recently told us, like they pretend they care about employment and inflation and all that, but all they care about is the stock market. And that's why we've had, over the past 20, 30 years, we've had the economy will grow 2 or 3% a year, whereas the stock market grows between 5 and 25% a year. So that's the expectation of that class of people demanding free money from their, from the Treasury and the Fed, whereas the town hall people who voted for Biden expecting $50,000 free money, on one hand for this debt write-off, now they're being told it's only $10,000. They were expected, on the other hand, a $2,000 stimulus, and he's saying, no, we're just going to give you $1,400. So those people at the bottom are starting to get angry. If they know, they've seen it now for 10 years. You could print free money, and they want it.
Viva la revolution, and remember, let them eat bugs. We're going to take a break and talk to Let Them Eat Bugs man himself, Mitch Feierstein. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to an undisclosed tropical location and speak with the legendary Mitch Feierstein. Mitch, first of all, my first question, is that a boat you're sitting on, or are you on dry land?
I'm on dry land right now. I've been on a boat for a couple of weeks, but my feet are dry currently.
Well, I'm glad you've got your sea legs in this tempestuous market environment. First of all, legendary Stan Druckenmiller. He is very, very short the U.S. dollar, Mitch. What are your thoughts on this?
Why wouldn't you be short the dollar? I mean, look, when we look at it, the USA has become a corrupt, lawless, tyrannical oligarchy. So, the USA doesn't have a rule of law. It's a country based now on propaganda, censorship, social credit scores, and a cancel culture. So most of the media is disinformation. The biggest economic plunder is taking place in history right now. Free speech is gone. It's groupthink out of Washington, Westminster. Wall Street and Hollywood are all pigs at the trough. It's the end of empire stuff, Max. You know, it's all about identity politics and woke. Michael Bloomberg, Larry Fink, who's at BlackRock, who the Federal Reserve has outsourced everything to. Right now, Bill Gates, the dictator, let them eat bugs. I mean, from vaccines to farmland, Bill Gates owns it all. So why would the dollar go higher? It won't. There's so much debt in the system, it's a problem. Over $300 trillion of debt. And they just keep printing and giving money away. So the dollar basically has declined since 1913, and we are about to see an implosion and the end of US dollar hegemony as we know it.
You know, let them eat bugs. I think that's a vote-winning slogan for sure. But, you know, you mentioned the word oligarchy. Okay, let's talk about that for a second, because oligarchy to many people mean industrial concentration, robber barons, that type of thing. But this oligarchy is an oligarchy of financial types on Wall Street who print money. And just give us a taste of what kind of this new oligarchy looks like, Mitch.
Well, look, we've got a disorganized government. We've got Janet Yellen, who's a lifetime Federal Reserve employee, almost 20 years at the Fed. Her policies caused the greatest wealth inequality in history. Now she's a Treasury Secretary. She was given almost $8 million in funds from the biggest banks and corporations in, quote, speaking fees, which were nothing more than kickbacks, legalized kickbacks. One of the contributors was Citadel, Citadel Robinhood. So all of these banks put Yellen into this position. Yellen is there for the banks, for the corporations, not for the people. And her policies created the greatest wealth inequality gap in history. And this economic mess that we're in, that's going to cause the biggest financial crisis and disaster to come. So this is the corporations that have taken over. We have no politicians. They've all sold out. Now the social media companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Jack Dorsey has sold himself to China. All of them are a big problem because they censor the truth, and the thought police are out there. You can't even write the truth on that if it disagrees with the narrative or the scripted story that the politicians want to get across. And the politicians are in the pocket of China. So unless you're online with them and spout their narrative, you will be dismissed from the public discourse in totality.
Yeah, let's talk for a moment about Japan, right? We've known each other for many years, and we both have a career going back to Wall Street. Remember back in 1989, Japan was ruling the world. The Nikkei was at 40,000. And then it crashed spectacularly. But these days, Mitch, you've got Stan Druckenmiller's moving into China and Japan. Warren Buffett just made a huge play in Japan, bought big portions of 5 big industrial companies in Japan. And of course, you were a banker in Japan for many years. So is the bear market in Japan over? Is this not what's going on in Japan, Mitch?
I don't know that the bear market's over in Japan, but they've had 35 years of economic malaise. And this is the model that the West has developed and taken on board, is 35 years of economic disaster and yield curve control. I mean, look, this is the definition. Albert Einstein's textbook definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting to achieve a different result. Unfortunately, the people are being bamboozled about a lot of things. They need to question everything that's happening to them, and they need to look. I mean, look, our president now, our new president, has executed almost 60 executive orders, the more than all total 7 presidents, the total sum of the past 7 presidents in the time he's been in office. People don't really have a choice. They think they have a choice, but they don't have a choice. This is all very bad, Max, especially from an economic perspective. We don't have growth. All we have is money printing. Money printing will end one of 2 ways: very badly, in a hyperinflation state like Zimbabwe or Weimar Republic. It's not going to end well, and the middle class is being eviscerated right now. The wealth inequality gap shows us that, and people need to wake up and understand what's coming. It was what I wrote in my book. This is what we've been discussing for a long time. The GameStop was an issue that people should have looked at. Reddit should, if they really want to punish people, they should be buying physical silver and push that price right up to the moon. because these ETFs, Larry Fink and BlackRock have, the ETFs are backed by nothing.
Great project for the Wall Street Bets crowd, for sure. Now, you mentioned yield curve control, of course, and it's at the short end. It's called quantitative easing. Banks buying back their own paper. They're now suggesting they're going to go into the long end of the market, the 10, 20, and 30-year segment of the market to try to keep rates from going higher. So the two questions. Number one, will they be successful to keep rates from going higher? And number two, are we now finally seeing the end of the myth of deflation and the beginning of the reality that's been with us for quite some time, and that is inflation? Mitch.
I've always argued that we've had selected asset class inflation, like there is asset class inflation. If you look at some of the prices of equities and some of the valuations, property valuation, look, commercial real estate is going to collapse. Real estate prices will collapse. I mean, this is all fake. You know, you've got the entire economy propped up by money printing. Money printing is insidious. It's dangerous. I mean, it will have its impact. We just haven't seen it yet. We're seeing now, like we saw in 2016, and we've discussed this before, you're seeing meat prices increase. But of course, Bill Gates said, let them eat bugs. Bill Gates now knows about vaccines. He's hoarding all the farmland in America. I mean, this is not going to end very well. This is the end of empire stuff. People are going to get fed up when they realize that they've been had with this whole political scam that's been going on. And people need to protect themselves now and get into understanding that the US dollar hegemony is finished and inflation will come roaring back when people least expect it. Yield curve control will be a failure, just like the Fed policy for the past 15 years has been a massive failure. Yet they keep repeating the same mistakes, put the same people in charge who have made the mistakes to clean up the mess that they made, and they won't.
Now, let's talk about China for a second and get your thoughts here. China is now the EU's largest trading partner. China has passed the U.S. for the first time last year in foreign direct investment. There are many China naysayers, but the data just keeps looking better and better for China. Your thoughts on China? They certainly have handled COVID crisis better than any other country. And what I mean by that is that their GDP is now bouncing back in ways that no other country is experiencing. I liken it to the post-World War II era, where the U.S. kind of won that war. Their economy was intact and they became dominant. It seems like China has won the COVID war, and that gives them a huge advantage going forward. But what are your thoughts on China, Mitch?
Well, look, I mean, China, I discussed with you about 2 years ago. I said China's a massive problem to the world. I mean, this disease, COVID started in China. Obviously, I don't know if you can trust their GDP numbers. And I know they've got a very tight relationship with Hunter Biden, with the money that was transferred to Hunter Biden's account and the Biden family that seems to be ignored by the mainstream media. I think China has a big advantage in a lot of the, they knew what was going on with COVID before anybody else because it was a point of origin. So do I think China will? I think China has surpassed a lot of other countries, and China is the real competitor to the United States and the real threat that seems to own most of the politicians in the West, from Washington to Westminster. So this is really not a good situation, that people are becoming reliant upon imports from China, like in medical products and technology, and as far as even basic antibiotics have all been outsourced to China. This is a matter of national security. The country should get back to their basic supply chains in-house rather than outsourcing everything. I think that right now, China's in the driver's seat. They've won the war without a shot being fired against the West.
Finally, Morgan Stanley is out with a report saying that the other major banks are saying that Bitcoin has displaced gold for their younger clients. There seems to be a generational shift. I know also over there at BlackRock, they're seeing a lot of money flows out of gold into Bitcoin. Up until even last year, this was heresy to say that Bitcoin would eat gold. And yet here we are in 2021, and gold is trading quite poorly. Bitcoin, of course, skyrocketing to new all-time highs. What's going on there, Mitch?
Morgan Stanley's mentioned, and most of the banks have mentioned, about commodities. I mean, commodities, everybody thinks commodities are going to be a boon for the rest the next couple of years in the coming decade. I think commodities have been massively oversold. I think people should really start looking at commodities as the undervalued asset classes of the future. There are a lot of assets out there that are underpriced and undervalued, but many stocks right now look for a big correction in the stock market. Last time you had me on, when Bitcoin was below 20,000, I told everybody to buy it. I was right on that one. I've got a lot of good calls coming up in terms of commodities and everything other than the stock market right now, because valuations are too rich there.
All righty, Mitch Feierstein, thanks for being on Keiser Report.
Thanks, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Want to thank our guest, Mitch Feierstein of Planet Ponzi. Until next time, bye, y'all.